Malibu, California. The Pacific shone like a sheet of polished steel under a late afternoon mud hit the Porsche like an insult. Daniel Cole stepped out, rage simmering as his kids splashed in filth, and the nanny, Amber Ruiz, laughed like it was the best day on earth. "You're fired," he spat. But hours later, when he saw what that moment of dirt had taught his children, Daniel realized he hadn't fired a nanny. He'd buried a lesson his money could never buy. Welcome back, family. Tap like, drop a "watching from your city at your current time" in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed. This story's about to test everything Daniel thinks he knows about love and control. He stepped out, smoothing his cuff as if the gesture could iron the chaos in front of him. Hydrangeas framed the drive like a magazine spread. The puddle did not care. It swallowed the boy's shins, licked at Ella's striped sleeves, spattered the rims of the Porsche with freckles the color of clay. Daniel registered the list automatically. Paint damage, driveway grit, bacteria, optics. If a drone caught this, Cole, the man who solved other people's messes, drowning in his own, tomorrow's market would laugh first. "Turn that off," he said, nodding at the hose. Amber didn't flinch. "They're building a dam. Max figured out how to brace the banks with stones. Leo's testing the flow. It's my driveway, not a riverbed." She kept her voice even. "It's also their world, sir. And right now their world is learning how water listens." Ella looked up, cheeks streaked brown, eyes bright. "We're helping the worms breathe, Daddy," she said, solemn and proud. "Miss Amber said they need tiny air holes." The phrasing hooked something soft in him and made it ache. He cut the feeling off. "Inside. All of you." The laughter thinned. The twins hesitated, glancing at Amber. She nodded, a small surrender. "Go on, loves." They sloshed toward the stone path, little boots chewing the bubbles they'd made. Daniel watched the brown ripples reach the Porsche's tire. He imagined the detailer's bill. He imagined an investor's face, if this were a headline. He imagined Clara, barefoot on the lawn, dirt in her cuticles, telling him to breathe. He tightened his jaw. "What exactly is happening here?" he asked, quieter now, but sharper. Amber rose, skirt heavy with water, calm as a metronome. "Discipline disguised as joy," she said. "Cooperation, patience, consequences. When the wall breaks, they rebuild." No tears, no shouting, just try again. He hated that the framing was elegant. It made him sound small. "This isn't a lab, Ms. Ruiz. It's a home. Things matter here. Cleanliness matters." "So does courage," she said softly. "And wonder. Wonder doesn't protect floors." His voice snapped like a door. "Or reputations." Her gaze held, not defiant, steadfast. "Reputations can be polished. Childhood can't be replayed." Ella, lingering on the threshold, whispered, "Sorry, Daddy." He felt the apology like a bruise and resented it for existing. "Enough," he said. Decision was a muscle he knew how to flex. "Clean this up, and consider your position terminated." The hose sputtered at the word terminated, as if the syllables kinked the flow. Amber blinked once, not in shock, but in something gentler. Grief for something fragile he couldn't name. "I understand," she murmured. "Good." He reached for the remote to open the garage, boundaries restored by buttons and doors. "But Mr. Cole," she added, as if placing one last stone on a wall she refused to let wash away. "What's spotless can still be empty." The sentence threaded the air and tugged at a seam he'd stitched tight years ago. He didn't answer. He couldn't without pulling the thread. He turned toward the house. Footprints patterned the stone like a constellation he wanted to erase. Inside, the foyer inhaled him. Cool, lemon-polished, correct. His shoes left faint brown commas on the marble, and the cameras watched, red dots blinking judgment. Somewhere behind him, the hose clicked off. The ocean, uninvited, grew louder, pushing white noise through glass. In the hall mirror, he caught a stranger, a man in a perfect home with a perfect car and a perfectly sealed expression. He straightened his collar until it lay flat, until the image looked like a brand again. From the drive came 3 small voices, no longer laughing, and the soft slosh of amber gathering buckets and stones, and the last of the day's brave water. He told himself he'd done what leaders did. Protected order, minimized risk, set the tone. Yet as he walked deeper, the house did not feel safer. It felt bigger, colder, like a museum after closing, the exhibits sleeping with their eyes open. His footsteps echoed, a sound he had always loved for its crispness, now oddly hollow, as if the floor were a drum he hadn't meant to strike. He paused at the threshold to his study, listening. The mansion exhaled. The ocean answered. No laughter threaded the space between. He put the phone down without checking it. The silence pressed. Out beyond the glass, the last curl of the hose hung in the air, still glistening, the curve of water that had been there minutes ago written in memory along the sunlight. A boundary, he told himself. Necessary. Sensible. And yet, somewhere out there, at the edge of the driveway, a thin crescent of wet still caught the light like a dare. He stepped farther into the foyer, swallowed by shine, unsure why every room suddenly felt a size too large, why a single sentence kept tapping. Spotless, empty, spotless, empty. Like rain he'd forgotten how to stand in. The house woke before the sun, but not with joy, only routine. The smell of brewed coffee drifted through the glass kitchen as the Pacific stretched, silver and indifferent, beyond the cliffs. Daniel sat at the head of the marble breakfast table, the same way he always did, posture straight, tie knotted, tablet glowing with unread numbers. Across from him, the children sat in silence. The clink of a spoon against a porcelain bowl became the loudest sound in the room. Ella, her hair still tangled from sleep, poked at her pancakes. Max stared at his orange juice as if it were an exam question. Leo, the youngest, kicked his feet softly beneath the table. "Daddy?" Ella said at last, voice small but clear. "Where's Miss Amber?" Daniel didn't look up from his tablet. "She's not working here anymore." The words landed like stones. "Because we got dirty?" she asked. He exhaled, slow and measured, like he was speaking to a boardroom. "She broke the rules, Ella. You know the rules keep us safe." Leo frowned, swinging his little legs. "But she made the house laugh." Daniel's eyes flicked up, sharp, startled. "What?" Leo's chin sank toward his chest. "When she was here, the house laughed. Now it's quiet." The silence that followed pressed heavier than the ocean mist outside. Daniel looked at their plates, half finished, at the folded napkins shaped like triangles. It was all perfect. All wrong. He forced a small smile. "Finish your breakfast. I'll be late for a meeting." He didn't have a meeting. What he had was a vacancy, and a sense of something gone, something he refused to name. Later that day, his assistant arrived with a list of replacements. Daniel lined up 3 interviews in the sunroom. The first candidate wore perfume strong enough to mask nerves. "Structure is everything," she said. "Children crave rules." The second smiled without warmth. "Discipline builds character." The third came with a folder of references and spoke like a manual. Hygiene, scheduling, respect, boundaries. Each woman said the right things. Each one looked at the children as though they were projects to manage. None of them laughed. When the last left, Daniel stood by the glass wall, overlooking the ocean. He could still see faint marks from yesterday's puddle, brown halos where the water had dried. He rubbed his temple. The sound of rain still haunted him, though the sky was clear. That afternoon, the children played in the family room, or tried to. The new nanny, hired on trial, arranged blocks by color while the kids stared at her like she was made of glass. Daniel passed by, pretending not to notice. But when he caught Ella sitting alone by the window, tracing her finger along the condensation, he stopped. "What are you doing?" "Nothing," she said quickly, then turned away. As he walked closer, he saw what she'd been hiding. Something folded in red. A small paper heart, its creases uneven but careful. He crouched. "Where did you get that?" Ella clutched it tighter. "Nowhere." "Ella." Her eyes met his, defiant, trembling. "It's from Miss Amber. She said I could keep it for when I forget what happy feels like." Daniel opened his mouth, but nothing came. He wanted to tell her to put it away, to focus on her toys, to stop talking about people who didn't matter. But he couldn't. He straightened, smoothing his sleeve. "Don't hide things from me," he said, softer this time. Ella nodded, slipping the heart into her pocket. As she did, it brushed against his suit jacket. He didn't notice the small red shape fall into his coat pocket as he turned to leave. Evening rolled in. The sea turned dark, the horizon a line of molten gold. Daniel sat at the kitchen counter, staring at his untouched dinner, while the new nanny whispered to the kids upstairs. Every sound felt wrong, too quiet, too practiced. His phone buzzed. An investor message. He ignored it. Another buzz. A meeting reminder. Ignored. The house was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock, steady, merciless, hollow. When the doorbell rang, the sound startled him. He stood, buttoning his blazer, composing the mask he wore for strangers. Through the camera feed, the driveway glowed in the porch light, empty. He opened the door anyway. Wind swept in, cool and salty, carrying the sound of the ocean below. There was no visitor, no car, no candidate. Only the faint, rust-colored outline of yesterday's puddle, a dark patch on the concrete, shaped like memory refusing to fade. He looked down at it, and for the first time in years, couldn't tell if he was angry or afraid. Behind him, the house stood still, its glass walls reflecting his silhouette. Sharp suit, empty eyes. Somewhere in his pocket, the small paper heart waited, unnoticed but patient, as if it already knew it would one day be the thing that changed everything. The mansion at night was too clean to sleep. Every hallway gleamed under recessed lights. Every corner hummed faintly with electricity. Daniel moved through it barefoot, the marble floor cool against his skin. The security cameras blinked in rhythm, red, patient, almost human. Watching. Always watching. He paused by the grand piano in the foyer. The keys caught the moonlight, but didn't dare make a sound. In their reflection, he saw himself. A man who had built perfection so complete it couldn't breathe. He kept walking. Past the portraits of founders, investors, and ancestors who had never smiled for the camera. Past the glass staircase that curled upward like a question. Past the faint mark on the tile where the children's muddy footprints had once been, wiped clean, but not forgotten. In the office, floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the Pacific, dark and restless. The sound of waves reached him in slow breaths. He used to love that rhythm. Now it only made him feel smaller. Daniel sat behind his desk, opened his tablet, and pretended to read. Numbers danced, meaningless, yucky. The reflection of the sea rippled across the glass surface, blurring graphs into ghostly shapes. He leaned back, sighing. Then he felt something in his jacket pocket, a folded edge of paper. He pulled it out. The red paper heart. It had survived the wash of his ordered life, creased and smudged with fingerprints. Across it, written in uneven blue crayon, were the words, "Miss Amber said mud is God's paint. Grown-ups forget colors." He stared at it for a long time. For a moment, the office disappeared. In its place came the scent of wet soil and lavender. Clara's laughter floated through the years like a melody he hadn't realized he'd memorized. It had been a spring afternoon, their first year in Malibu. The company had just gone public, and reporters called him a visionary. Daniel had stood by the terrace, phone in hand, half listening while Clara knelt in the garden below, barefoot, planting jasmine. Her hair was messy, tied with a strip of cloth, her dress smeared with dirt. "You'll ruin your nails," he'd said, half joking, half scolding. She looked up, sunlight spilling over her cheekbones. "Good," she'd laughed. "It means I did something real today." He'd frowned, not understanding. "We can hire people for that, Clara." "And miss the fun?" she said, grinning. "Love is messy, Daniel. If it's clean all the time, it's probably dead." At the time, he'd smiled politely, kissed her forehead, and gone back inside to answer emails. He hadn't noticed the way her laughter lingered behind him, like a soft rebellion. Now, alone in the glass office, he whispered the words back to himself. Love is messy. The phrase hit like a truth he'd locked in a safe and forgotten the code to. He set the paper heart on his desk. The red crayon lines caught the moonlight, glowing faintly. A message buzzed on his phone. He reached for it. Mother. Dropping by tomorrow. 10 a.m. No question mark, no greeting. Just a statement of control. He stared at the screen. His jaw tightened. Marianne Cole didn't visit. She inspected. Every time she came, she left the air colder. He typed back. Fine. Then deleted it. Then wrote, okay. That one too. Finally, he set the phone face down. Outside, the ocean roared louder, as if warning him. When he finally went to bed, the silence followed him. The pillowcase smelled faintly of lavender, the last scent Clara had loved. He closed his eyes, but the house refused to rest. Every hum, every camera blink felt alive. Sleep came like surrender. He was standing in the garden again, barefoot. Rain poured from a bruised sky. The soil turned warm and alive beneath his feet. Laughter broke through the storm. Children's laughter. He turned. Ella, Max, and Leo were dancing in puddles, their hair plastered, their cheeks shining with joy. Beside them, Clara spun, her white dress streaked brown, her hands muddy as she lifted the youngest into her arms. She looked up and saw him. "Come on," she called, voice bright with freedom. "You'll catch cold standing there." He tried to step forward, but the ground felt heavy, like wet glass. He reached out, his fingers brushing the air between them, but the distance stretched. The rain grew harder, the light dimmed. "Clara!" She smiled, that same unbothered smile. "You're always so afraid to get dirty." Then the storm swallowed her. He woke with a start. The sound of waves filled the room. His cheeks were damp, his heartbeat unsteady. He reached up, half believing it was rain, until his fingers came away wet with something warmer. Tears. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the quiet press against his chest. The cameras in the corner blinked once, red and steady. Watching. Recording. Daniel turned his head toward the window. Outside, the sea shimmered silver beneath the moon, endless and untamed. For the first time, he wondered if perfection had cost him the only thing that had ever felt real. And somewhere in that stillness, the sound of distant laughter, faint, impossible, echoed again in his mind. If this scene stirred something in you, there's more to come. Tap. Like if you felt Clara's presence. Comment where you're watching from, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens when Daniel's mother arrives tomorrow, because that visit will change everything. The next morning smelled of lemon polish and tension. Daniel had been awake since dawn, pacing the marble corridor, straightening things that didn't need straightening. The ocean fog hadn't yet lifted when the intercom chimed. "Mr. Cole," the gatekeeper's voice said. "Your mother's here." Daniel's stomach tightened. Moments later, Marianne Cole swept through the foyer like a cold front. Pearls first, perfume second, judgment third. She didn't walk so much as glide, heels clicking with authority. Even the security cameras seemed to flinch. "Darling," she said, kissing the air near his cheek. "The place looks sterile." "It's clean," Daniel replied. "So was your father's office the day he collapsed," she said, removing her gloves. "Order without warmth, dear. It's always been our family curse." Her tone wasn't affection, it was autopsy. She turned to the children, who stood by the stairs, uncertain. Ella clutched Leo's hand. "Come greet your grandmother," Daniel prompted. They obeyed, quiet as mice. Marianne smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "My, how tall you're getting," she said to Ella, brushing a speck of imaginary dust from the girl's collar. "I hear you had a nanny who encouraged mud baths?" Ella blinked. "We were helping the worms breathe." Marianne's lips pressed into a line. "Of course you were." She turned to Daniel. "And what lesson exactly was that meant to teach?" Daniel adjusted his cufflink. "Curiosity," he said simply. Marianne laughed, a sharp, dry sound. "Curiosity is the first step toward chaos." She surveyed the space, her eyes scanning the glass walls, the pristine floor, the minimal decor. "At least the house hasn't suffered her influence. Though I must say, I'm surprised you allowed such behavior in the first place. You've always been the disciplined one." "It was one incident, Mother." "One is enough," she said. "Help should behave like help." Daniel said nothing. He watched the way the children's shoulders tensed, how Leo's thumb crept toward his mouth until Ella nudged him gently. The scene was too familiar, a mirror of his own childhood dinners, where silence was considered virtue and laughter was rebellion. That evening, the family sat in the dining room, a place too elegant to feel like home. The chandelier dripped light over the polished table. Everything gleamed, crystal glasses, folded napkins, spotless plates. Even the roast chicken looked sculpted rather than cooked. "Sit up straight, Ella," Marianne said gently, but it wasn't gentle. "Yes, Grandma." The sound of silverware filled the pauses between sentences. "So," Marianne began, cutting her chicken with surgical precision, "your assistant mentioned new interviews. I trust you found a suitable replacement." "Not yet," Daniel said, his fork barely touching the plate. Marianne's eyebrows rose. "Not yet? You can't run a house like this without proper supervision." "They're fine," he replied too quickly. "They?" She smiled faintly. "Or you?" He exhaled. "Mother, please. It's been a long week." "I'm sure it has," she said. "You've had to manage alone. Though I do hope you're not starting to sympathize with that woman's methods." Ella looked up. "Miss Amber wasn't bad." Marianne's gaze slid to her, sharp but controlled. "Sweetheart, I'm sure she meant well, but good intentions don't keep a family respectable." Daniel set down his knife. "Mother." She turned to him. "Yes, dear?" He met her eyes. "They're children. They need freedom, not reputation." For a heartbeat, the room stilled. The chandelier light trembled across their faces. Then Marianne's smile returned, brittle and precise. "That kind of sentiment," she said softly, "destroyed your father." The words struck like a slap. Daniel's throat tightened. He remembered the night his father collapsed in that same suit and tie Daniel now wore. How Marianne had blamed weakness. How she had told him men who feel too much never last. He looked at his children, 3 pairs of eyes darting between adults, unsure which world was safe. He swallowed hard. "Eat your dinner," he said. His voice came out quiet, tired. The rest of the meal passed in perfect silence. After Marianne retired to the guest room, Daniel tucked the children into bed. Ella clung to her blanket. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "Are you mad at Grandma?" He smiled faintly. "No. She just thinks differently." Max yawned. "Will Miss Amber come back?" Daniel hesitated. "No, buddy. Not right now." Leo's voice was a whisper. "But Daddy..." The house doesn't laugh anymore. Daniel froze. He brushed a hand through the boy's hair, forcing a smile. Go to sleep. When their breathing evened out, he stood at the door, watching the soft rise and fall of small chests under blankets. Then Ella's voice came again. Drowsy, but sure. Maybe if she comes back, the house will laugh again. He didn't answer. He couldn't. He closed the door quietly, but the words followed him down the hallway like echoes in glass. By the time he reached his office, the house was still awake. The hum of lights, the whisper of the sea, the camera's unblinking red eye reflecting back his face. For the first time, Daniel realized the truth in what they said. The house didn't laugh anymore. It only watched. The next afternoon, the house tried to behave. Windows polished, floors immaculate, air too still. But in the sunlit corner of the patio, a quiet rebellion was unfolding. Ella sat cross-legged beside a shallow tray of water she'd borrowed from the art cabinet. On her lap lay a pile of folded paper, old memos Daniel had left on his desk, spreadsheets turned into small, creased dreams. Max dipped his fingers into the tray, testing the water's ripple. "Do you think they'll float?" he asked. "They have to," Ella said with certainty. "Miss Amber said boats only sink if they forget what they're carrying." Leo, clutching a crayon, nodded solemnly. "Then we gotta draw something good on them." He began scrawling crooked hearts on the boat's sides. One red, one blue, one green. From the kitchen window, Daniel watched. His first instinct was to stop them. The tray was too close to the marble. Water could spill. The ink could stain. His mind lined up reasons the same way he lined up contracts: order, safety, control. But then he saw Ella blow gently across the tray, setting the tiny boats adrift. Her hair glowed like sunlight trapped in motion. Max leaned close, whispering directions to imaginary sailors. Leo clapped as one of the boats circled another. Daniel's hand froze on the doorknob. Something about their laughter, soft, careful, afraid to be too loud, felt like a ghost trying to come back to life. He stayed there, unseen, watching. "Look," Ella whispered. "They're racing." The boats bumped, spun, and steadied. The water shimmered under the glass ceiling. "What if Daddy gets mad?" Max asked. Ella bit her lip. "Then we'll tell him Miss Amber said play makes people brave." Leo traced a wet finger along the tray's edge, leaving streaks like silver paths. "Do you think Daddy forgot how to be brave?" Ella's voice was barely a breath. "Maybe he forgot how to be happy first." Inside, Daniel's reflection stared back at him from the window. Flawless shirt, measured posture, a man who could command any boardroom. And yet, watching his children's quiet game, he felt smaller than he ever had. He thought of Clara again, her bare feet in the garden, soil under her nails, her laughter rising above the sprinklers. He'd told her once that her hands were too beautiful for dirt. She'd smiled and said, "Then maybe dirt is beautiful too." Daniel swallowed hard. His chest tightened. The sound of giggling snapped him back. Max had splashed too hard, and a drop of water landed on the marble edge. Ella gasped, reaching for a towel. For a split second, Daniel almost stepped forward, ready to scold, to restore the peace, to erase the evidence of life. But then Leo laughed again, high and pure, and something in him broke. He didn't move, didn't shout, didn't fix. He just watched as the spill spread into a small puddle, harmless, shimmering, alive. And for the first time, he felt the absurd impulse to laugh too. The hidden Nanny camera in the corner blinked red, recording it all. The children at play, the man at the window, the almost smile that ghosted across his face before he caught himself. A near moment, a fracture in the armor. The AI alert later would tag the footage under non-compliance, property risk, water proximity. But the machine wouldn't understand what it had really captured: a heartbeat. That evening, as the sun dipped into the horizon, Ella gathered the paper boats. Their edges were soft now, ink bleeding slightly into the folds. She lined them on the patio railing, one beside the other, a small fleet of fragile hope. When the last one was placed, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the red paper heart. The one Miss Amber had given her. The one that kept finding its way back, as if it refused to be forgotten. She looked toward the glass wall where her father's office light glowed faintly. Then she turned to the family tablet mounted by the staircase, the one Daniel checked every morning for reminders and updates. Standing on tiptoe, she taped the paper heart right at the center of the screen. When she stepped back, the reflection of her tiny face shimmered inside the heart's crimson edges. "Now he'll have to see it," she whispered. Max nodded. "What if he gets mad?" "Then at least he'll remember," she said. "Miss Amber said people don't change when they're happy. They change when something makes them feel again." Leo smiled, sleepy-eyed. "Then maybe tomorrow he'll feel lots." Hours later, Daniel walked down the corridor, tablet in hand, scrolling through project updates. The device blinked, then froze. He frowned, tapping it once, until his own reflection stared back, framed by the red paper heart. The message inside still read, "Mud is God's paint. Grown-ups forget colors." He stood there for a long time, unable to look away. Somewhere outside, the wind rose. The air carried the scent of salt and storm. A notification buzzed on the smart screen above the kitchen console. Weather alert. Uncharacteristic rainfall approaching Malibu coast. Expect showers by midnight. Daniel turned toward the ocean, its horizon already darkening with low clouds. On the patio, the paper boats trembled in the wind, their fragile sails fluttering like prayers waiting to be answered. The first thunder rolled in from the Pacific like a slow, angry drum. The sky cracked open, spilling streaks of silver across the glass walls of the Cole mansion. Rain began as a whisper, then turned into a roar. Daniel stood in the living room, tablet in hand, watching the weather alert flash again. Severe rainfall. Avoid outdoor activity. The command should have comforted him. Rules always did. But something about the sound of rain against glass felt almost alive. A streak of lightning illuminated the coastline. For a brief second, the reflection on the window split his face in two. Half the man he was, half the man he might have been. Then came the laughter. High, wild, unmistakable. He turned sharply. Through the sliding doors, the patio glimmered with rainwater, and three tiny figures darted into view. Barefoot, soaked, free. "Ella! Max! Leo!" Daniel shouted, dropping the tablet onto the couch. He sprinted toward the glass, heart hammering. Outside, the puddle from days ago had returned, grown into a small shimmering pond. The paper boats were floating again, rain pounding them like tiny waves. The children were shrieking with joy, their clothes plastered to their skin. "Stop! You'll get sick!" he yelled, pushing open the door. Wind and water crashed into him, stealing his breath. Ella turned, laughing through the rain. "Daddy, look! They're sailing again!" Max jumped beside her, sending a splash up his legs. Leo spun in slow circles, arms wide. "Inside now!" Daniel barked, but his voice was lost in the storm's chorus. He stepped out, shoes sinking into the wet grass. The cold bit through his slacks. The air smelled of salt and electricity. "I said now!" he tried again. But even to himself, the order sounded hollow. Because in that moment, as lightning flashed and thunder chased it across the sky, he saw something that stopped him. His reflection in the window, immaculate, stiff, drenched in self-control, and in front of him, three children laughing like the world had never taught them fear. A drop of rain hit his face, then another, and another. Leo looked up, eyes wide with delight. "Daddy needs to learn to laugh too." The word struck deeper than thunder. Daniel froze. For years, no one had spoken to him like that, with innocence sharp enough to break armor. He took a shaky breath. Leo. But the boy had already gone back to work, scooping mud into a small mound. We're making Miss Amber's dam again, he said proudly, so the boats don't sink. Max stumbled, slipping in the wet grass. Daniel's reflex kicked in. He lunged forward, catching him before he fell. Mud splattered up Daniel's sleeve, streaking his perfect shirt. He looked down at the brown smear, instinct screaming to recoil, but something else whispered louder. Clara's voice. Love is messy, Daniel. He crouched lower, the rain pounding harder now. Max giggled, brushing mud from his arm. You got dirty too, Daddy. Daniel exhaled a broken laugh, quiet, uncertain. I guess I did. Ella squealed, pointing. He smiled. Daddy smiled. He shook his head, rain dripping from his hair. Don't tell anyone. But then she laughed again, pure and fearless, and it was contagious. Daniel found himself laughing too, the sound rusty and strange in his own throat. He knelt fully, shoes sinking deep into the puddle. The water was shockingly cold, but it felt right, real. Show me how it works, he said. Max's face lit up. We make walls so the boats don't fall over, like this. Daniel joined them, pressing his palms into the mud. The texture squelched between his fingers, grounding him in a way no success ever had. He helped them build, reshape, and rescue each tiny paper boat that tipped under the rain. When one tore, Ella frowned. It's broken. Daniel reached for it, his hand steady. Then we make another. They laughed together as the storm raged above, an orchestra of chaos, cleansing everything it touched. From the second-floor window, Marianne Cole stood in her pearl-trimmed robe, motionless. The rain streaked the glass, but her outline stayed sharp, a statue of control framed by lightning. Her son, the man she had sculpted from discipline and distance, was kneeling in mud, laughing. Disgrace, she thought. Or maybe, worse, defiance. Her hand tightened on the curtain. Each flash of lightning lit her face, pale and disbelieving, as if judgment itself had been summoned to witness rebellion. Down below, Daniel's laughter mingled with the thunder. The puddle rippled under the downpour, reflecting fragments of light and sky, and something new, a man reborn in the rain. For a fleeting second, he looked up at the window. He couldn't see his mother clearly through the glass, but he felt her presence, the weight of legacy watching, disapproving. And yet, for the first time in his life, he didn't care. He stood, rain-soaked and smiling, and lifted Leo into his arms. The boy squealed as water dripped from Daniel's hair onto his nose. "Daddy!" Leo laughed. "You're all muddy." Daniel grinned, voice warm and steady. "Maybe that means I'm learning." Ella clapped, boats bobbing at her feet. "Miss Amber would be proud." He nodded, his heart swelling. She would. A flash of lightning tore through the sky, and thunder answered. The rain poured harder, drenching the world clean. Daniel closed his eyes, tilting his face upward. For once, he didn't hide from the storm. He let it baptize him, every drop washing away years of silence, guilt, and fear. When he opened his eyes again, his children were still laughing, the paper boats still sailing, the puddle alive with color and sound. And somewhere deep inside him, a truth took root. Sometimes control destroys what love is trying to grow. He didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time, he wanted to find out. Morning arrived softly, wrapped in silver mist and the scent of wet earth. The Pacific was calm again, its waves exhaling against the rocks below like a tired giant resting after a tantrum. Daniel sat on the porch steps, a steaming mug of coffee in his hands. His hair was still damp, his shirt rumpled from sleep. For once, the silence around him didn't feel empty. It felt alive, warm, even. The rain had washed everything clean. The patio stones, the glass railings, even the faint outlines of the puddle where last night's rebellion had taken place. But the laughter, he realized, had left a mark the water couldn't erase. Behind him, the house hummed quietly, a different kind of quiet, no longer sterile, but peaceful. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the grandfather clock, the whisper of the ocean breeze through the open door, it all blended into something he hadn't heard in years, life without tension. He took a slow sip, letting the bitterness ground him. His reflection shimmered faintly in the coffee's surface, a man half the one he'd been yesterday. Last night, he'd crossed the line he'd drawn his whole life. He'd knelt in the mud, laughed like a fool, and felt his heart beat without permission. It terrified him, and yet it freed him. He set the mug down beside him and picked up his tablet. The device blinked awake, still bearing the red paper heart taped across its screen. He didn't peel it off. He just smiled faintly. Opening his inbox, he started typing. Amber, I'd like to discuss returning to your position. The children miss you. He stopped. Deleted it. Too formal. Too cold. Too safe. He tried again. Amber, I owe you an apology. I let my fear masquerade as control. You were right about everything. He hesitated, staring at the words. His finger hovered over send, then drifted away. It still felt like armor, polished, detached. He deleted it again. The blank screen glowed back, waiting. He breathed, slow and deep, feeling the morning air expand in his lungs. He looked out at the yard, the rain-soaked garden, the scattered remnants of paper boats still clinging to life. Then, finally, he wrote what his heart had been trying to say all along. Amber, I was wrong. If you're willing, I'd like to talk. He hit send before fear could stop him. Upstairs, small feet pattered down the hallway. Daddy! Ella's voice rang out. He turned as she appeared on the landing, her raincoat already buttoned, yellow boots squeaking against the tile. Max and Leo followed, half-dressed and half awake, each clutching something different. A bucket, a toy shovel, a paper boat. Where are you going? He asked, though the answer was obvious. Outside, Max said. We have to check the dam. Ella grinned, eyes bright. Maybe Miss Amber will come today. Daniel's chest tightened. Why do you think that? Leo smiled sleepily. Because rain makes good things grow. He couldn't help but laugh. You might be right. They dashed toward the backyard, boots squeaking, laughter trailing behind them like sunlight breaking through clouds. For a moment, Daniel stayed on the porch, watching them through the open glass doors. Their joy was effortless, something he was only now learning to trust again. He picked up his mug and took another sip. It was still warm. By mid-morning, the sky had cleared into a soft blue. Sunlight stretched across the wet garden, turning droplets into tiny diamonds. The world looked brand new. Daniel moved through the house slowly, noticing things he'd always overlooked: the faint handprint smudge on the hallway glass, the tiny crack in the baseboard near the stairs, the family photo on the wall where Clara's smile still glowed brighter than the rest. Perfection, he thought, had been an illusion all along. What he needed now was presence. He paused by the desk in his study. The drafts of his deleted emails still glimmered faintly in the trash folder. He stared at them for a long moment, then emptied it. The screen went blank. Armor gone. He exhaled, lighter. The doorbell chimed. It wasn't loud, but in the stillness, it felt seismic. Daniel's heart skipped. He stood, wiping his palms on his jeans, realizing only now how nervous he was. The children must have heard it too. Their footsteps thundered across the floor as they raced toward the front door. Maybe it's her, Ella shouted. He caught up just as the gate camera blinked on. Through the monitor, he saw her. Amber Ruiz. Same blue uniform, hair pulled back, eyes uncertain. She stood by the gate with her hands clasped, hesitating like someone unsure if she was welcome or about to be turned away again. Daniel's throat tightened. He pressed the intercom. "Amber," he said softly. Her head lifted at the sound of his voice. "Mr. Cole," she answered, cautious. "You asked to talk?" For a second, the words stuck. The man he used to be wanted to control this, make it sound businesslike, procedural, safe. But the man standing here, mud still under his nails, heart still wet from the storm, wanted none of that. He opened the gate. Amber stepped forward slowly, her shoes splashing through the shallow puddle that lingered on the driveway. Sunlight framed her, catching in the rain droplets that still clung to the leaves around her. Daniel took a breath. "Thank you for coming." Amber nodded. "I wasn't sure if—" He interrupted gently. "If I meant it this time." Her lips curved faintly. "Something like that." He smiled, a real one. "Then let me prove it." Behind him, Ella's voice rang out. "Aunt Amber!" The kids burst through the door, arms wide, boots squeaking, laughter echoing. Amber knelt instinctively, and they crashed into her, holding tight. Daniel stood still, watching the moment unfold, the way the house seemed to exhale, the way the light shifted, the way everything finally felt right. And yet, inside him, a single question stirred like thunder on the horizon. Could he truly change? Or was this just the calm before another storm? The sea breeze carried the scent of wet salt and blooming jasmine as morning light spilled across the porch. Daniel stood at the threshold, hands in his pockets, watching Amber kneel to hug the children. The way they clung to her, arms tight, laughter bubbling like water freed from a dam, made something inside him settle. For the first time, the house felt like it was breathing again. He waited until the children ran off toward the garden before he spoke. "Amber," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." She straightened, cautious. "You already said that in your message." "This time," he said, "I need to say it right." He took a breath, every word deliberate. "I mistook control for care. I thought keeping them spotless meant keeping them safe. But I see now. I was cleaning away their childhood." Amber studied him, eyes steady. The sunlight glinted on her damp hair. "That's a good start, Mr. Cole." "Daniel," he corrected softly. She nodded once, then crossed her arms, gentle but firm. "If I stay, there's one rule. We protect laughter here. No one gets punished for joy." Daniel's lips curved. "Deal." Amber smiled, small but real. "Then let's rebuild." The rebuilding didn't come with speeches. It came with sounds. It began with the sizzle of pancake batter on Sunday mornings. Amber showed Ella how to flip them without burning her fingers. Max drizzled syrup like an artist gone wild. Leo declared himself official taster and gave everything a 10 out of 10, even the burnt ones. Daniel, once allergic to chaos before breakfast, found himself standing in the kitchen doorway, coffee in hand, watching it unfold. There was flour on the counter, jam on the floor, and music on the old Bluetooth speaker. When Leo offered him a half-eaten pancake shaped like a cloud, Daniel took it without hesitation. "Best one yet," he said, mouth full. The children cheered. Amber laughed softly. "You're learning." "Fast learner," he replied. Later that week, Ella came to him with a plan. "We're planting a flower bed," she said. "For Mommy." Daniel felt something catch in his chest. "For Clara?" Ella nodded. "Miss Amber says flowers remember love, even if people forget." He didn't trust his voice enough to speak. Instead, he followed them into the garden. The flower bed went by the fence line. Tiny hands scooping soil, laughter rising with every worm discovered. Amber worked beside them, humming an old Spanish lullaby. Daniel knelt, pressing his palms into the dirt, the smell of earth filling his lungs. When the last seed was buried, Ella stuck a popsicle stick into the ground with a name scrawled in crayon, Mommy's Garden. Daniel brushed soil from his fingers and smiled. She'd love this. Amber looked at him. Then you're already keeping her alive. Days turned into a rhythm, each one softer around the edges. Afternoons found Max building sandcastles in the new sandbox by the patio. Sometimes Daniel joined, helping to carve towers until Leo came barreling through to test their strength. The laughter that followed was loud enough to scare the seagulls. Inside, the once pristine hallway changed too. One evening, after a finger painting session, Amber let the children press their colored palms along the white wall. Daniel walked in mid-giggle and froze. Wait. Amber turned. They're signing their happiness. He stared at the rainbow smears, each tiny handprint imperfect and brilliant. The wall, once his pride, was now alive. He didn't stop them. Instead, he left the room, returning a few minutes later with a wooden frame. He hung it around the section of painted hands like art. Amber blinked. You're framing it? Daniel smiled. Some memories deserve protection more than paint. She laughed, the kind of laugh that carried gratitude. You might actually be human after all. One afternoon, the children's laughter spilled across the driveway again. Daniel was washing his Porsche, the very car that once defined him, when Leo decided to help. A splash of muddy water hit the door, splattering brown across the silver finish. Daniel froze. The old version of himself twitched inside, ready to snap. But then he saw Leo's wide eyes, waiting to see if Daddy would shout. Instead, Daniel dipped the sponge back into the bucket and flicked water back. It hit the boy's shoes. Leo gasped. You did it on purpose! Daniel grinned. Guess we're even. Leo laughed so hard he nearly fell into the puddle. Amber, watching from the porch, shook her head with a smile. That poor car never stood a chance. Daniel shrugged. It's just metal. They're the ones worth polishing. That evening, the house glowed warm with sunset. Pancake batter still dusted the counters. Sea air drifted through open doors. Laughter echoed from the garden where the flower bed shimmered with tiny buds. Daniel stood in the hallway, gazing at the framed handprints. Beneath them, the children's toys lay scattered. For once, he didn't feel the urge to tidy. He reached out, tracing one of Ella's prints with his finger, and whispered, Keep laughing. Behind him, Amber appeared in the doorway, her voice soft. You've changed. He turned. No, he said. I'm finally home. Amber smiled, eyes kind but knowing. Then let's keep it that way. But as the evening deepened, the front gate buzzed. Daniel frowned, glancing toward the security screen. A black car idled outside, its headlights cutting through the dusk. And stepping out, pearls, heels, composure sharp as glass, was Marianne Cole. She paused at the threshold, her silhouette framed by the glow of the porch light. Inside, the sound of laughter spilled through the open windows, the children's, Amber's, even Daniel's. Marianne froze, her expression unreadable. The wind caught her scarf, fluttering it like a flag at half-mast. She stood there for a long moment, hand hovering above the doorbell. Would she enter and break the fragile peace? Or would she turn away and let the house laugh without her? Golden hours spilled like honey across the Malibu cliffs. The garden shimmered, the puddles from the last storm now only soft patches of damp earth. The air was heavy with salt and the faint hum of the sea. Daniel knelt on the lawn beside Ella, Max, and Leo, helping them piece together something that refused to cooperate, a kite made of newspaper, string, and hope. Hold it steady, he said, his fingers smudged with glue and grass stains. I am holding it, Max insisted, his tongue poking out in concentration. Ella squinted toward the horizon. It needs a tail. Miss Amber said balance is everything. Leo, barefoot as always, waved a scrap of red ribbon. This can be the tail. Amber stood a few feet away, arms crossed, smiling faintly. Looks like the engineers are learning from their mistakes. Daniel chuckled. Or repeating them creatively. The first attempt failed almost immediately. The kite leapt an inch and nosedived into the dirt. The second shot got higher, then tangled itself in a jasmine bush. Laughter erupted all around him, light and unrestrained. He exhaled, grinning. Third time's the charm. They tried again. Ella held the spool, Max steadied the frame, and Leo shouted, "Now, Daddy, run!" Daniel sprinted across the lawn. The kite fluttered, wobbled, then, as if catching its breath, rose. The children screamed with delight. "It's flying! Daddy, it's really flying!" Daniel slowed, staring upward as the kite danced against the golden sky, the tail streaming like a comet. The wind tugged at it, and for a moment it seemed the whole house was exhaling, free of weight. He turned to Amber, who watched quietly from the porch. Her eyes shone, the reflection of the kite glimmering within them. "Funny," she said softly, "how getting dirty makes you feel clean." Daniel smiled, breathless. "Maybe that's the lesson I'll never forget." They stood there a while, the children running barefoot through the grass, laughter scattering like sunlight through water. The mansion behind them, once a shrine to order, now echoed with something warmer. Life. Later, in the kitchen, the air smelled of cinnamon and ocean wind. Pancake batter crusted the bowl. Leo's handprints still marked the counter. Daniel rinsed the dishes while Amber helped Ella cut fresh flowers from the garden. When he looked up, his eyes caught the framed handprints in the hallway, the bright splashes of color against white marble. The image filled him with quiet awe. He realized he hadn't thought about perfection all day. Amber turned toward him, sleeves rolled up, hair loose from her bun. "You're smiling," she said. "Am I?" "Yeah." She rinsed her hands. "It suits you." He laughed softly. "Careful. I might get used to it." "Good," she said. "That's the point." As dusk deepened, a sound came from the gate, a low hum, then the quiet slam of a car door. Daniel's chest tightened. Mary Ann. Through the window, he saw her standing by the steps, pearls gleaming even in the dim light, posture unbending. She looked toward the garden, her gaze sharp, until it softened. The laughter reached her first. On the lawn, Ella twirled barefoot with Leo. Max chased the kite's tail, now trailing in the breeze. Amber stood beside Daniel, calm and unafraid. Mary Ann's eyes moved over the scene. The mud-streaked shoes, the rumpled clothes, the glowing smiles. For years, she had measured success in silence and spotless rooms. But this was something else. She looked at her son. Their eyes met through the glass, hers questioning, his steady. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. For a moment, the woman who had once demanded obedience seemed to falter. Her hand rested on the railing. Then, instead of stepping forward, she gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod, and she turned away. The sound of the car door closing was soft, like the end of an era. Minutes later, a drizzle began, light, silver, unexpected. Ella looked up. "It's raining again," Amber gasped, mock dramatic. "Quick, the kite!" The children squealed, rushing into the open yard. Daniel laughed, following them without hesitation. The rain soaked his shirt, clung to his hair, ran down his face, and he didn't care. Max spun in circles. Leo held out his hands to catch the drops. Ella danced barefoot, the kite string still in her grip. Amber stepped onto the porch, shaking her head with amusement. "You're all going to catch a cold." Daniel turned, smiling wide. "Then we'll laugh through the fever." She laughed too, soft, alive. And as the drizzle thickened into a warm, coastal rain, Daniel ran through the garden with his children, their laughter mixing with the ocean's hum. The house that had once stood as a monument to silence now pulsed with the rhythm of joy. Inside, water from their footprints marked the marble floors, tracing a messy, beautiful map of where love had returned. That night, the mansion didn't echo, it answered. The sea whispered through open windows. The laughter of 3 children danced through the halls, soft as prayer. Daniel sat on the porch steps, the sound of rain and ocean blurring into peace. Amber joined him, handing him a towel and a smile. "Looks like the house finally found its voice," she said. Daniel looked back through the glass doors, where light shimmered on the framed handprints, the flower bed beyond glowing faintly in the drizzle. "Yeah," he murmured, "and it's beautiful." Amber leaned against the railing. "What do you think it's saying?" Daniel watched the garden, the sky, his children twirling under the rain. That we're finally alive. The wind shifted, carrying laughter toward the sea. And for the first time, Daniel didn't just hear it. He felt it. Sometimes the dirtiest days reveal the cleanest truths. Love doesn't live in spotless rooms, but in muddy hands, second chances, and the courage to begin again. If this story touched you, drop "The House Laughs Again" in the comments, and share this story with someone who needs a reminder. Perfection isn't peace. Love is.